So welcome everybody to What's in That Hedge, a talk by Adele, brought to you by CPRE Shropshire we are the countryside charity. In a moment we'll hear about foraging in hedgerows, the things to eat and use with Adele, who on her website calls herself forager, author and enthusiast. Adele runs a foraging school in the Brecon Beacons in Wales. Before we start, I'd like to point you to our website. That is www.cpreshropshire.org.uk, where you can find a host of valuable resources on hedgerows and how and why we should be protecting them. There's also more details about our upcoming talks, walks and workshops, as well as the past recordings of talks that we've already had. The next one coming up, the next talk coming up in January is by Roy Vickery, on the folklore of hedgerow plants, but this is currently booked up, so just keep your eye on that. The next talk available that currently does have spaces is hedgerows, trees and the planning system, which will be given by Emma Marrington, who is from our national offices of CPRE. She's CPRE's rural policy specialist. That talk will look at tree preservation orders and how to object to a planning application that includes hedgerow loss. With just to plug really, we're still looking for people to help us plant new hedgerows over Christmas. Check out our hedge planting page on our website, and you can find details of how to book and which dates. You can do this via an online form, or you can email Sarah Jameson, our branch manager, on admin@cpre.org, cpreshropshire.org.uk. And just to quickly note, really, at CPRE we are passionate about the countryside. We're passionate about hedgerows, amongst other things. After all, CPRE at its inception, which Adele informed me it was our anniversary yesterday. We started on the 7th of December 1926. And right at the inception of our organisation, we have been at the heart of some of the first planning legislation, including hedgerow legislation, much of which CPRE was right at the forefront of writing. So after today, if you're thinking about what you can do to support our aims and support the countryside and protection of hedgerows, please do head to www.cpre.org.uk/get involved. Now I have the great pleasure of handing over to Adele. I will shut up and you can hear from somebody much more interesting than me.
Oh, thank you, Connor. That was a really nice introduction there. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out, on such an awful night. I'm here in the Brecon Beacons and it is blowing a hoolie. It's absolutely terrible, I have to tell you. My interest in hedgerows has changed my life, to be honest. I wrote this book, I don't know if you can see it, it's called the Hedgerow Handbook, and this was published 10 years ago now, and it changed my life because having written the book and promoted it at the Hay Festival, people started asking me to take them out for walks to find, anything we could find in the hedgerows, really. And I'd never really done anything like that before. And I really was surprised that anybody would need to do that, because I just assumed that everyone knew all the hedgerow plants. And I discovered that we don't. So the things that I took for granted, being of a certain age probably, children weren't learning the same things, and their parents probably didn't always have time to be able to teach them about the wild plants that grow largely because of hedgerows. And so, as I say, it changed my life, which I feel I'm grateful for it every single day. I have to tell you, I do have the best job in the world. And so my approach is quite philosophical, I think. So tonight we're going to be looking at lots of different plants that either grow in hedgerows, around hedgerows, or just slightly beyond hedgerows. But before we start, I'm going to read you a poem. I hope there's not a collective sigh of, oh no, I don't want a poem. This poem is is very, very apposite to the CPRE. So it's not very long. It's called Dandelion on a Tractor, and it's the poem that starts off the book. Ah, you should see Dandelion on a tractor. Gone the old look that yoked him to the soil. He's a new man now, part of the machine. His nerves of metal and his blood oil. The clutch curses, but the gears obey his least bidding, and lo, he's away, out of the farmyard scattering hens, riding to work now as a great man should. Here's the knight at arms breaking the field's mirror of silence, emptying the wood of foxes and squirrels and bright jays. The sun comes over the tall trees, kindling all the hedges, but not for him, who runs his engine on a different fuel. And all the birds are singing, bills wide in vain, as Dandelion passes proudly up the lane. This was written by R.S. Thomas in 1950, so that was 24 years after the CPR had been born, really. And for me, this poem says so much, because it tells us about the coming of the tractor and how everything changed because of that. And for me, it's so important that we remember where we are and who we are. And a really good way of doing that is by looking at plants. So no more poetry for today. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flick through the book. Connor has some images that I hope I'm going to be able to see. Am I going to be able to see these images, Connor? Great. Okay, the screen sharing. So the first image we've got here, if you can see, is the ash. Now, all the illustrations I'm showing you this evening are by an amazing artist called Lizzie Harper, who lives in Hay-on-Wye, and she will only draw from life. So you can imagine the time it took to actually put the book together. So the ash is the queen of the forest, to match the oak as the king of the forest. And you might not necessarily think of this as being something that grows in hedgerows, but they do. They grow quite happily in hedgerows, continually chopped back, sometimes so much so that you can't actually see what they are. The ash, if it's left to its own devices, grows into quite a tall tree, but if you keep your eyes peeled, you find all kinds of things in hedgerows that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Now, what you may not know is, sorry, I've got a note saying somebody's breaking up a bit. Anyway, I'll just do my best. So the ash is actually belongs to the same plant family as olives. So if you've ever seen the little samaras on the ash tree, so samara is you see the bundles that look a little bit like keys, they're the samaras. You can make a really good substitute for capers by using the samaras. You've got to get them when they're really flat. So right at the beginning of March, just as the leaves are coming out, you'll start to see the keys there. If they're so flat that you can't feel a little bump underneath them, they're absolutely perfect for making a pickle from, which tastes just like capers. It's absolutely delicious. So you don't necessarily need to have a Mediterranean climate in which to have that kind of food. In Norse mythology, of course, the tree of life is designed as an evergreen ash called Yggdrasil, whose roots extend to the depths of the earth and come up through the middle of the earth, Midgard, and whose branches disappear into the highest heavens, or Valhalla. And the tree itself, in mythology, is watered by the twin concepts of faith and wisdom. We know that ash wood is incredibly strong. It's an ideal timber for all kinds of uses, especially, funnily enough, for the bodies of both guitars and drums. Yet my book does contain recipes. I'm going to have to try not to look at the notes up there, because we can leave the notes till the end. So yes, so that's ash, and we're going to skip along now to beech if we can, Connor. Thank you very much for that. We don't tend to think of beech mast these days as you know, good edible food, but it's not so very long ago that we would relish beech mast in the days where we didn't really have that much to eat at all. In fact, if any of you have read Laura Ingalls Wilder books, you know, The Little House on the Prairie, there's a brilliant chapter in that book that describes very well the children having to go out in snow to uncover the beech mast to bring them back to be processed because they didn't have anything else to eat. And this would have been in, Laura Ingalls Wilder was writing in the 1930s. So really not that long ago, things have changed so much in such a short space of time. You can actually harvest beech mast yourself if you want to try it. It depends what kind of beech you have. There's lots of different kinds of beeches. So if you want to try beech mast, then keep your eyes out for beech mast which is as large as possible and slightly plump. Not always easy to find, but really worth looking for. And of course, the other famous recipe that you can make from beech leaves is beech leaf noyau, which is it's a spirit basically. So it's you take the young green, very pale leaves, and you basically douse them with sugar, castor sugar, water, and brandy or cognac. Leave it for as long as you can bear to not try it, but you need to leave it for about 3 months or so, and then you have a lovely. It's quite flavoursome actually. It's an unusual flavour because you get all the kind of bit of harshness from the leaves, but it's really quite delicious. A little bit kind of like a Campari actually. And you can also make nougat from beech nuts as well, but that does require some good foraging there. It's not the easiest thing, but you know, I kind of sometimes the food that we eat is so easy we don't really appreciate it. So I think it's quite nice to go foraging for things, because for me, a lot of the beauty of foraging is not just about finding something to eat. It's about going out and having a nice time. So you may decide that you're going to go for a lovely walk with your family and maybe take a bag and forage some bits and pieces. But the main thing is that you've just been out for a walk with your friends in nature. So if we can skip along now, please, to the next one. So bird cherry. If you can find bird cherries before the birds do, well done. If you're able to do that, then bird cherry makes the best cherry brandy, because I don't know if you've ever tried them, but it's incredibly pokey. It's highly citric bird cherries. So it means that if you did want to make a cherry brandy, that all that flavour really comes through. And you can also make bird cherry flour. Admittedly, again, that's one of the things that is time consuming. You know, it's quite time consuming to grind down the stones. But again, it's worth a try, even if you never do it ever again. Just doing something that one time really connects you with nature. And the next image that we've got is something that is a very popular hedgerow plant. It's the blackberry. So if we could have the blackberry there, that would be great. If there's anybody out there that hasn't picked blackberries, I'd be very surprised. But you might be surprised to know that most times when I take foraging out, there will be at least one person who says, I've never picked them because I'm not sure they're the right ones. Do you find that shocking? I find it really shocking, but it happens quite a lot. Or people might think that, you know, you see the illustration here. I'm sure you know that the blackberry starts out a green colour and then kind of graduates through pink until it ends up, you know, like that lovely juicy black colour that we love. Lots of people don't realise. They think it's different. It's a totally different plant. So this is the kind of thing that, this is the reason that I think that foraging is a really useful thing, because people don't necessarily want to go out on their own because they don't know what's what. But if somebody like me can tell them and show them, then it means that, especially with children, it's very, very, very empowering to be able to know something about plants. And I think also, if you can name it, it's not necessarily essential to name a plant, but if we can name a plant, it means we kind of have more of a relationship with it. Does that make sense? I hope so. Before using blackberries, here's a nice tip. If you leave them on a large sheet of baking paper for half an hour or so, all the little insects that would have been captured as you pick will either fly away or crawl away, because, you know, might not sound massively important, but our insects are actually really, really vital. You know, without them, we're no one. So I think it's really good to, you know, have an idea that we need to respect what it is we're picking, and the fact that it's not only you know, for humans. Now, one of the best recipes in the book, I think, is for a chili blackberry syrup, which is kind of given to me by Andy Oliver, who's an old friend of mine. You might have seen her on some of the Master Chef classes, or Britain's Greatest Chef. So she made the most amazing chili blackberry syrup. The recipe for that is in the Hedgerow handbook, but if any of you want it, or any of the other recipes, then I can you know, send them to you via Sarah and or Connor, if that's handy. Blackberry leaf also makes a really nice tea, which is soothing for a sore throat. It's actually best made with fresh young leaves gathered in the springtime. And all you need to do is throw a washed handful into a teapot, steep, add sugar or honey to taste, and just drink it down. It's one of those things as well that if you have a winter cold, it's nice to be able to freeze that mixture and go to it when you need it. So what's the next one? Chamomile. Now, you might not think of chamomile as being a hedgerow plant, but trust me, if you have a hedgerow backing onto a field, there's a very, very good chance that you'll have chamomile growing in a field. There are several different kinds. There's the German chamomile, which is the really tall one that you might have seen. The one I used in the book, though, is the nobile one, the Roman chamomile. Chamomile, of course, makes a lovely tea, which is very, very soothing. Also, I don't know if you know this, but the chamomile flower is the secret ingredient which is used to flavour Spanish sherry, manzanilla, if you've ever had that. So manzanilla means little apples, and chamomile that also shares the name of the apple. If you can find chamomile, just squeeze and sniff, and you'll get that lovely kind of appley scent. So spicy chamomile chai is something that I made. Chamomile panna cotta is lovely. Bit of a faff to make, but you know, as I've just said, we're not too bothered about that, are we? Because we're out foraging. You know, Elizabeth Taylor said about her jewelry, it's not the having the jewelry, it's the getting. And for me, foraging is a bit like that. It's not just about finding the thing, it's about the whole process of going out and being in nature. We know this is really good for us. And if you're foraging, then it's a kind of a double whammy, because you're not only in nature, but you're finding things that you can eat. Free food, who's not into that? The next one is a bit of a cheat, actually, but it's one of my favourites. I absolutely love sweet chestnuts. So you would see sweet chestnut where there are hedgerows, but we're kind of going a little bit further from the hedgerows on this one. How to tell the difference between chestnuts and conkers? I'm sure you know this, but it's a moot point. So conkers are the nuts from the horse chestnut tree, and they're not edible. So you want to take care not to confuse them with sweet chestnuts. If you eat a conker by accident, it's not going to kill you, but it's not going to make you happy either. but it is quite easy to tell them apart. So the outer shell of the conker has the lumpy, bumpy, pointy bits, a bit like a green Sputnik, and it's thick and coarse, but the shell of the sweet chestnut is really prickly with finer points. You'll always find, if you manage to find an undamaged chestnut, you'll find that it has 3 separate little nuts. There'll be one of those nuts which isn't any use to anyone. And I would say to you that if you have sweet chestnuts in your area, go to them tomorrow, because in the storms here, this is a really, really great time to harvest sweet chestnuts, is after a storm. I do this most years. And of course, Christmas is coming up. So if you can harvest some of your own sweet chestnuts and kind of roast them on Christmas Day, then you're going to be emulating that brilliant, brilliant Christmas song. Chestnut brownies you can make. Chestnut and ricotta cheesecake is absolutely delicious. And you know what? If you want to make some of these recipes, but you don't have the ingredients, you can go to Morrison's and buy some. I know that's massively cheating, but you can. Why not? Marrons glacé is the French way of using chestnuts, which isn't my favourite because it's soaking them in sugar time and time again. But if you like that kind of thing, then that's something that you could do with those chestnuts that are fallen from the trees. Next one, we've got Cleavers, which is definitely a good hedgerow plant. If anybody's not familiar with Cleavers, I would be very surprised. In the illustration here, you'll see there's a diagram of the stem of the cleaver, which has, if you look at it head on, you'll see the profile is square. So that's a really good way to identify cleavers. Now, where I live in the Brecon Beacons, I can get, it's quite mild. I can get cleavers growing all year round. They are edible. The young shoots coming up in the spring are the tastiest way of eating cleavers in the springtime. But cleavers also are really, really good for lymphatic drainage. Now, lymphatic drainage is your lymph system can sometimes get a little bit kind of clogged and worn out, especially in the winter months. So if you can find fresh green cleavers and simply put them in water overnight and then drink the water the next day, not only will you have a lovely pea shoot flavoured drink, but I would say that you're probably going to feel superior to other people because you'll be feeling a little bit kind of zingy and energetic. So that is for nothing. I mean, cleavers are the kind of things that people have growing in the gardens and just, get rid of them and stick them on the bonfire. But they're a really, really, really useful plant. Later in the year, you might be really surprised to know that you can make coffee from the dried seeds. You can see a picture of the seed head there, because your humble little cleaver belongs to the same plant family as coffee. Who knew? I have to admit that it is a faff if you want to make your own cleavers coffee, because you have to go out there and you have to gather the cleavers. We're talking about autumn time here. If you have a dog, it makes life a bit simpler, because all you've got to do is let your dog loose in a field full of cleavers. Get your dog to come back to you, brush the dog lots, which you will like and the dog will like, and then slow roast those cleavers and then turn them into coffee. I have to admit to you, I've only ever done this 3 times and they've all been for demonstration purposes. And every time I do it, I think I should do this more often because it doesn't take that long really. The old name for cleavers actually is philanthropon, which means love because of the clinging habit of the plants. You can make a curry with cleavers, you can make cleavers soup, lots of other things, depending on how imaginative you are. So on to the next one. And we're looking at comfrey. So I'm assuming that some of you might be keen gardeners out there. Hopefully I'll find out that later. Comfrey is not only really, really great as a plant which will provide good, a really good liquid fertilizer for your tomatoes or any other vegetables, but you can eat comfrey too. You don't want to eat too much in one go, but it's worth trying. So if you gather the young leaves, not the old ones, the young ones, and just use them in the same way as spinach. The stalks can be blanched and eaten with butter and a little bit of lemon juice, and the roots too can also be dried and roasted in exactly the same way as chicory or dandelion root and used as a drink. But as I say, you don't eat loads and loads and loads of it in one go, especially with the roots. But I would say give it a try. If you want to use comfrey as a plant food, all you need to do is put a few handfuls in a bucket, top up with water, and leave to leach for a few days or until the water goes brown. How to know whether your your comfrey is ready to water your plants is if it smells disgusting, then it's ready. Hope that's useful information for you. Next up, we're looking at crabapple. By the way, if you have any questions, please stock up any questions for the end here. I'll help you with anything I can, or if you want to, drop stuff into the chat room, please do. So the crab apples that you see, you will definitely see crab apples in hedgerows, but they're very often hidden, and very often you will mistake the crab apple possibly for something else, maybe even a briar rose you might mistake for crab apples, because there are lots of wild plants that the blossoms look very, very, very similar. How to identify a crab apple is to wait for the autumn months, when there should be lots and lots and lots of them around. There's certainly lots in my part of the Brecon Beacons here, and I would imagine that wherever you are, if you keep your eyes peeled, you'll be able to see them. We tend to forget how edible crab apples can be. Yes, they are lots of different varieties of crab apples, by the way, or wildings sometimes, which is usually a cross between a crab apple and a domesticated apple. Both those kind of apples are rich in pectins. So if you're into making jam, you leave out, don't bother to buy the expensive pectin-rich jam sugar. Just use crab apples or baking apples. Interestingly, the crab apple is considered to be one of the most magical of all trees. Some people believe that if you fall asleep under one, you'll be fair game for the fairies to carry you off. So always beware the fairies. And when you call someone crabby, meaning bad-tempered, you're actually referring to the bitterness of the fruit. So that's the direct thing from the fruit to calling somebody a name, really. I love crab apples. One of the things we did once was we made crab apple toffee apples for bonfire night, and it was delicious because you had all that sweet toffee kind of crackling on the outside and the really kind of astringent crab apple on the inside, which is delicious. Crab apple jelly is a go-to recipe for me. I absolutely love making them. And if you really top tip for any of you looking for any of these ingredients, go on Facebook and ask locally, if you've got a local Facebook group, and somebody somewhere will say to you, yep, come and take them away. I don't know what to do with them. Crabapple cheese is an old recipe. Crabapple cake is delicious, believe it or not. Crabapple spicy marmalade. These are all things that I have played with making during the writing of the book. So next we are on to damsons. So Prunus domestica. I don't know if you know, but damsons are actually named for where they originated in Damascus. So the Damascus plum they used to be. You'll see lots of different plum varieties in hedgerows. So green gages, damsons, sloes are in the same family. So all these fruits are drupes, which means that they have a stone inside. And a really good way to find out if you have a damson family is to just cut it in two and see if there's a stone in the middle. If there's a stone in the middle, then it's that family, and it means and it's edible. I do have a separate recipe and a separate section for sloes, because of course they're one of the probably one of the best known hedgerow plants, aren't they? Who doesn't love sloe gin? The answer to that actually is me, but that's a whole other story for another day. All plums are rich in vitamin C, which is a good thing to help boost the immune system. They contain something called sorbitol, which helps to regulate the digestive system, hence their use as a laxative. So I'm sure you've all heard of that. The actual damson is the little sister of the plum, really. A damson is a wild plum. Keep your eyes out for it, because you very often find them in old hedgerow shrubs, kind of at the edges of fields or a native woodland. It likes to grow in edge places. Sugar damsons, you could try damson gin or vodka, so made in exactly the same way as sloe gin or sloe vodka. Damsons in syrup, sugar damsons you can make. Lots and lots and lots of things to do with this particular plant. It's one of my favourites, actually. So how are we doing out there? Are you keeping up? It's kind of quite difficult, because I kind of feel like I'm talking into the void. But anyway, I just hope you're really enjoying this. The next up is, I keep saying, oh, this is my favourite and that's my favourite. Actually, the truth is I love all of them, but I particularly love dandelions. I think they are absolutely gorgeous. I suspect as well that if you were to buy them in a garden centre, they could cost quite a lot of money. And very often we don't see beauty that is under our feet, because we take so much for granted, don't we? But pollinators absolutely adore dandelions. So if they are starting to come up in the spring, before you've had time to mow, I would say just see how it feels to just let your entire garden be covered in dandelions. It will look beautiful. I know that some of you will be shuddering at the thought. But if you do that, I tell you what, it will make such a big difference to the wildlife, all wildlife in the area. Just absolutely love them. So there's lots of different things you can do with them. The leaves are edible, and you can use them like spinach. They don't taste anything like spinach, and they do need to be fresh young leaves, and they do need to be blanched, because they are bitter. Bitter herbs are something that we don't eat enough of in Britain. If you go to Italy, France, anywhere in the Mediterranean areas, you'll find bitter herbs are, regularly left, not left, but kind of put on the table with any kind of meal. People always eat their greens, and we don't do it so much in this country. I think that's probably why we have so much IBS. In the UK, we are the best in Europe at having irritable bowel syndrome. Eat more kimchis, eat more sauerkraut, and most of all, eat more dandelions, because they're free and everybody knows what they look like. You probably know that the name dandelion comes from an old French name for the plant, Dandelion, meaning lion's tooth, referring to the jagged leaves. That name it's the same meaning just about anywhere on the planet. And by the way, dandelions grow all over the world now. There's another name, which is more recent. It's French, which refers to its diuretic qualities. Pissenlit, meaning wet the bed. When I have kids on foraging courses, they actually, that's quite fun. You can also make a tiny little rubber band out of a dandelion if you want to. All you need to do is break the stem of the plant and spread the oozy sap thinly along your finger, wait for it to dry, and then peel off the ends and tie together. Not a whole lot of use, but fun. And some people used to believe that the milky sap of a dandelion is good at getting rid of warts. I suspect that there's an awful lot of truth with these old ideas, but we just don't know the reason why. So we tend to think it's, just a little superstition, but it's worth trying. Dandelion coffee also is really good and easy to make. And now is the time to be harvesting dandelion roots to make coffee. So, because let's face it, it's wet out there. So if you have clumps of dandelion, now is the time to dig them up. So you dig them up, clean them thoroughly, and chop them up, and you can just air dry them and then grind them and use them just like coffee. It doesn't have the hit of caffeine, but it has all the flavour and costs absolutely nothing. You can also make dandelion flower wine. That's one of the old recipes that people were doing kind of back in the 1950s, really. But again, I kind of quite like making things in an old-fashioned way. What we're looking at now, Connor, is elder. And I could bang on about elder for quite some time, but so I'm going to try and restrain myself. It's probably my favourite for so many reasons. In the spring and early summer, you have all those beautiful little flowers that we can make elderflower cordial from, which is so delicious. And then in the winter, in the autumn months, you get the berries. Now, elderberries is where the real magic is with elder for me. By the way, the elder itself is one of the trees that is considered to be sacred in the UK. And it's ruled over by a spirit called the Elder Mother. Now, the Elder Mother I tend to think of as a bit like a mother-in-law type, in that really kind, really benevolent, really lovely, but don't mess her around. Does this make sense? I hope so. So, whereas the leaves have medicinal uses, really quite lots of medicinal uses actually, they're toxic. And then you also get the berries, which are probably one of the most useful remedies I think I've ever come across. So with elderberries, this is, I'm going to tell you to suck eggs now, but I so often get people that don't realize that elderflower and elderberries are the same plant, and that the berry comes after the flower. So I'm just telling you that just in case you didn't know. What's happening now with elderberries, they have been clinically trialed in at least 3 places around the planet and found to be incredibly efficacious at keeping the human immune system boosted. And what is happening right now is the NHS are putting an awful lot of money into elder remedies and finding out exactly what it is that is so powerful, because they believe that it's possible that this common plant could be the thing to stop COVID in its tracks. Now that is outrageous, isn't it? I do have a recipe for you to be able to make your own elderberry remedy. Basically, what I mean, it might be a bit too late now because there's not so many elderberries on the trees, but I would say bear it in mind for next year, because if you can go out with your children and make your own elderberry, flu remedy, that is far better than getting something over the counter. Because I think if you make your own remedies, then you have a connection there. And again, it's not just about one thing. There are lots of different things going on. So you are outside, you are picking, you're looking for other ingredients, then you're going back home and you're making your own remedy, which has got to be good, hasn't it, for so many reasons. I especially like to get children involved in this process because it works, so extensive, you can get a brand which you can buy over the counter. It's called Sambucol. Please don't buy it. It doesn't have a whole lot of actual elderberry in it, and it's quite expensive, and it's very, very sugary. So that's not good for man and the beast, really. So elderberries, don't forget about elder. Very, very, very important hedgerow plants, isn't it? Typical hedgerow plant. And the next one I've got here is hawthorn, which you might see as an absolutely archetypal hedgerow plant, which is exactly what it is, along with blackthorn, which is the sloe. These were probably the originators of our hedgerows in the UK. So we believe that the oldest hedgerows are up in the north of Scotland, or the remnants of them. And hawthorn and blackthorn are both very, very spiny and spiky, and kind of difficult to get through. So they would have made good stock-proof barriers for to keep animals either in or out of somewhere. So that was part of the development of the hawthorn. Hawthorn itself, also known as maythorn, is one of our most ancient trees, often used in hedging, but very, very often found as a freestanding tree. Funnily enough, the actual hawthorn can grow up to about 10 meters or so. It's deciduous, has shiny lobed leaves, which unfurl in early spring. And those frothy white blossoms have a really distinct and quite heady scent. So you can see why it's got all that. I think the scent of hawthorn is why we have all the idea about, being the tree of the fairies, really. So if the elder has the elder mother, the hawthorn has the fairies. So when hawthorn grows together with ash and oak in close proximity, it means that that place is meant to be particularly steeped in fairy lore and part of fairyland itself. I like these stories because they tell you about the relationship between human beings and plants. We make these stories up in order to make sense of the world, really. Does that make sense? Because of the thorns of hawthorn, the tree is considered to be protective, and this includes against fire. So what used to happen is people would make a globe of woven hawthorn to be brought into the house to ask the fairies to make sure that the house wouldn't be burnt down. Every year that globe would be replaced and the old one burned, presumably outside. And I just wonder what would happen if I went to my household insurer and said, look, I've done a hawthorn globe, it's sitting outside the house, looks really great. Can I have a discount on my household insurance, please? Because the fairy's going to take care of me. What do you reckon? Probably not going to work. But the magic of the hawthorn is further marked in that shape of the flowers. Those 5 petals are considered to make a pentagram, itself a magical sign, sometimes known as the elven cross. And like the elder, the heady fragrance of mayflowers, if inhaled deeply, is believed to help you access the other world. And of course, we've seen how the tree was named for the time its flowers blossom on May Day, which is when the pre-Christian celebration called Beltane, traditionally dedicated to the fairies, took place. As the sap rises in the new trees and plants, so it does in human beings. And traditionally, Beltane is a time of sexual congress. Could this mean that the recipes using the leaves, fruit, and flowers of the hawthorn might have aphrodisiac qualities? Well, you're just going to have to find out for yourself, aren't you? Hawthorn fruit leather is a fantastic recipe, by the way, very easy to make and a great thing for kids to put in their, make for themselves and put in their school bags, because you've got all the goodness of the hawthorn, and you can put other fruits in there as well, including crab apples is a really good thing with no sugar whatsoever. So that's a good one. Next up, we've got hazel. If you are able to gather hazelnuts before the squirrels get to them, then I'm a very, very, very jealous person, because what happens to me is I have my eye on some prime looking hazel, and then I go back a couple of weeks later and I see that lots of them are on the ground, and I pick them up, and what's happened is a squirrel has taken one bite, found it's not ripe, and chucked it over its shoulder, so the whole thing is spoiled, which is very, very tedious, isn't it? So hazel is a really important tree for Britain's native woodlands. They don't really grow beyond 6 meters, and they're often tucked away in hedgerows, again cut back quite a bit. The catkins, which are called lamb's tails, appear in the spring. That's a really good way to identify them. The catkins are actually a male flower. The female flower is no more than just the size of a tiny bud, but it's the male catkin which is visible. Now, the old Irish Gaelic name for the hazel is the coll, and so sacred was this particular tree that one of the 3 Celtic kings of Ireland, MacCúil, meaning son of the hazel, was named for it. And I suspect that that might be because all nuts, but particularly hazelnuts, if you can get your hands on them, are really, really nutritious. They're storable and, you know, tasty as well. The tree is meant to stand where the real world and the other world join, and the tree spirit is said to protect the tree, especially its nuts. Now, I'm from Yorkshire originally, and we used to call a hazelnut milk churn peg. Never really knew why it was milk churn milk peg. But every nut tree had its supernatural guardian or protector, and you know, all around the UK, you'll have different names for the same kind of characters. Symbols, you know, nuts, you know, are also symbols of fertility, and symbolism in plants is fascinating. You know, because again, they're telling you that story of human beings and plants. Powdered hazelnuts mixed with honey and water can actually help with a troublesome hacking cough. So again, you know, as we found from the sweet chestnuts, we know that nuts are a good source of calcium, protein, potassium, and you can make a tea of hazel leaves to help menstruate, to help regulate menstrual flow. Particularly good if you're having really heavy periods. Good thing to know about. Also, forked hazel twigs are used by dowsers, aren't they? Any dowsers amongst you? It definitely works. I had dowsers up at my old house when all else, you know, failed. I had a dowser come up and he managed to find where the water sources were that were causing a few issues. So some of the recipes I've got here are for spicy caramelized hazelnuts, Italian hazelnut biscuits, and my favorite is fallen hazelnut and cheddar crackers. So if you've ever seen Craddock's Savoury Biscuits in Brecon, that's the recipe that is used in the book there. I'm glad to see some messages coming up. By the way, I have absolutely no idea what time it is. But I did just see flash up, somebody's asking about invasive hedgerow plants, and I've got the exact one that I was thinking of is coming up next, Connor, which is Himalayan Balsam. So is Himalayan Balsam invasive? Oh yes. Do we start seeing it in hedgerows? Yes, we do. Often like to grow along watercourses as well. Now, you know, we tend to vilify these plants, and all they're doing is they're being successful. And don't forget, it was human beings that brought these plants to Britain from the Himalayas. About 5 years, I think, between Himalayan balsam and Japanese knotweed finding their way over to this country. This would have been in the 1800s. It's very interesting that we see both these plants starting to really grab a hold probably about 25, 30 years ago. So that is either climate change or the plant adapting, or probably a bit of both, actually. So whilst we're looking at Himalayan balsam and trying to find ways of restricting its galloping growth, we may as well eat it because all of it is edible. The best part
We seem to have an issue. We seem to have lost Adele. Hopefully that is very, very temporary. I wish I could take over for you and talk, but Adele is the expert and I would be making it up as I go along. So hopefully she's able to come back soon and I'm not left on the screen looking at a beautiful blossom for quite a while. Don't worry, I've been in more embarrassing situations. You should have seen how much I was blushing when we were talking about hawthorns. Anyway, Adele, you're back. You've come to save me. I hope. No, you haven't. You've left. Don't panic. We, not like I am. This is definitely a first. I am frantically clicking to see if I can save us all. I think the important thing to realise is that Adele is, of course, in the Bracken Beacons. And with tonight's weather, no doubt that's playing its part. Here she is. Here's it. I was just going to give another plug to a few things, but no, Adele seems to be back to save me.
Hello.
Hello, Adele. You're back.
Hello. I don't know what happened there. I suspect it might be the vagaries of the weather, really.
No problem, no problem. I only had a few moments of panic, but glad you got back.
I'm here. I don't know where I was. So we were talking about Himalayan Balsam, weren't we? But I'm wondering if it is 5.2, and whether we should really start looking at whether there's any questions, because I can bang on with this stuff for much longer, but I'm very aware that there might be some questions coming in. Should we do that?
Yeah, let's go for it. There are some questions if you want to deal with the questions that are in the chat first.
Yeah, whatever.
We will open to the floor. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Take some scrolling. Okay, so first question from Laura. Does your book also contain recipes?
Yes, lots of recipes. It's called the Hedgerow Handbook, Recipes, Remedies and Rituals.
What I might do, in fact, because a few people have a few questions, what I might do is go through people in order of when they first asked their first question and just ask them to unmute themselves to ask sort of their questions in a list if they don't mind. So can I ask Laura, if you're still with us, whether there's anything else you want to mention on top of your question about the recipes? If you don't know how to unmute yourself, it should be in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Yeah, I was just wondering how available the book still is. Is it still in publication?
Oh, yes. It's a proper bestseller. You can buy it just about anywhere. I would say try not to give Jeff Bezos any money. I'd rather you got it from a local bookseller, but obviously I can't arbitrate that. The main thing is that I like people buying it. So yeah, it's absolutely. And next year there's going to be a big thing going on with it because it'll be 10 years. And so we're having a new foreword and a couple of new recipes and things like that in it. So yeah, it's as I say, it's been a joy for me. So thanks for the question.
Now we have Jenny. Jenny, if you're still with us. Looking on my screen. I'll see what.
I have no questions. I just thought it was interesting that I'd read about dandelions earlier in the year.
Brilliant.
Being very desired.
No, that's good. I think we just have a thing in Britain that we like really neat, tidy lawns, and they're great. But I think sometimes we go a little bit too far. Possibly, you might say I go too far in the opposite direction, and that would also be true.
Thank you.
Nellie.
Hi there, thanks for taking my question. Oh, questions, sorry, I'm being quite greedy. I'd like to know if there are any hedgerow plants that can be used as spice, And I'd also like to know what your go-to plants, what you'd have to have in your foraging bag, as kind of all-rounders. In fact, you've kind of talked about a lot of plants that do many different things, but I'm interested in what you would definitely go out and pick.
So spice, we'd be looking at horseradish. We'd also be looking at wood avens, which is also known as clove root, which grows prolifically under hedgerows and just about everywhere else. This is one of those questions that as soon as I go away, I'll go, I've missed loads and loads and loads. My real go-to is elder, actually. So I think it tends to be the more common plants, the things that we see every single day, that we just ignore and don't really take any notice of, are usually the most useful things. And the other thing I've learned to embrace is the word weed. I used to hate it because it sounds like it's quite a derogatory term. And then I thought, well, actually, a weed is something that's really strong and resilient and can grow anywhere. So why do we call something weedy? Because it's the opposite, really, isn't it? I really like fat hen. So that's a crop which grows all over the world. And we've had it in the UK for at least 7,000 years. And most people don't know what it is. It's nutritious, it's tasty, it's prolific. That's one of them. But, again, it's one of those things that, there's lots and lots and lots. And I haven't even got onto sloes yet, have I?
I've caught up to the part of the chat where we suddenly had a cliffhanger. In my midst of panic, I'm not sure what the cliffhanger was, Becky. You'll have to point me out of what was said at that specific time. I went into sudden, and yes, thanks, Becky. Yours is the hawthorn. Your favourite hedgerow plant is the hawthorn. I hope that wasn't based on what I said when Adele left us about my face blushing when we did get onto hawthorn. We've got Karen's favourite is honeysuckle. Nikos asks if this, I think, is this with this, Nikos, are you asking whether this recording will be available after the talk? If so, yes, it will be available on our website. Everybody who's joined us today will be sent a link in due course so that you can watch the video back. You can watch my sort of moment of panic.
I had one of those myself as well.
Just please let's not allow it to become one of those YouTube hypes or whatever.
Also the cliffhanger. I had the lady there talking about the cliffhanger thing with the Himalayan Balsam. I think the question was, what was my favourite part of Himalayan Balsam? And it's the little seeds. So those seeds which can thwack, if you shake the, which we shouldn't do this, but if you were to shake one of the branches of the Himalayan Balsam, they would thwack to at least 4 meters. I know because I've tried it. So that is why they spread so prolifically. There are advantages to it. They're brilliant for pollinators. Absolutely love it. But, and sometimes human beings tend to think it's the fault of the plant that it's successful. Human beings are the most successful animal on the entire planet. And we do brilliant things, and we do dangerous things, and we do stupid things, and we do damaging things. It doesn't mean to say that we're evil, does it? And neither are the plants that are similarly successful.
A question here from Catherine, which I'll read out. There are lots of plants that look really similar to dandelions. I wonder if you would end up in a bit of trouble if you picked the wrong one.
Probably not, actually, because all those plants that look like dandelions, they're usually the sow family, or the hawkweed family, and they're all edible anyway. And the other thing I would say is that if you're going to put something in your mouth that you don't know what it is anyway, that's just stupid. So if you don't know what something is, don't put it in your mouth. And that applies to lots of other things, not just wild plants, I would have to say. So we are not forced to put any of this stuff in our mouths, are we? And that's the thing that, you know, kids pick that up really quickly. Don't put it in your mouth. Sometimes we can go a bit too far the other way. Don't put anything in your mouth at all. Put it in your mouth if you're sure what it is. And don't if not. So no, I don't think there's any chance of us hurting ourselves.
We've got Mia's 8-year-old daughter with us, and she wants to know how wide hedgerows can spread if left to their own devices. Very interesting question.
That is such a good question. I'm thinking of the widest spreading hedgerows that I've seen around me are along the canal, and what's happened is that they're largely blackthorn, and blackthorn self-seeds quite prolifically. So the hedges kind of get wider, but they get less hedge-like because you get the blackthorn kind of will grow like stems on their own. So it's almost like, it's a really, really good question. So it's almost like outliers for the hedgerow. So you've got the hedgerow, and then you've got bits that just like the blackthorn that just kind of grow alongside it and kind of make the shape of it slightly different. Yeah, really great question. The hedgerow you've got behind you is actually a really nice one on this film, Connor. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is, isn't it? And it's one that CPRE Shropshire actually worked on. We do have our branch manager with me, and I don't know if, Sarah, you want to unmute yourself, just tell us a little bit about the hedge that's behind me. I am not, you know, don't want to fool you, or I'm actually in my bedroom. I am not out in the Shropshire countryside.
I did think it was looking a bit calm over there.
Yeah. In fact, I'm not sure if Sarah's with us anymore.
Hi, Connor. Yeah, I am here.
Yeah.
I've unmuted myself. Yes, the hedge behind Connor is one that CPRE Shropshire's hedgelaying workshop laid last month in November, and we left as many berries on it as was possible.
Amazing. Gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah, it was lovely.
It's like a proper supermodel hedge, that one.
Yeah, very much.
Thank you, Sarah. We've got a few questions, Adele. Where can we find your book?
Any bookshop, usually. You can buy them directly from me if you wish, or you can get them on Amazon, or the Hours in Brecon has it, Bookish in Crick has it. That it's quite easy to come by. I think you might even be able to find it in a charity shop. You know, I buy lots of books from charity shops. I've got, this is a bit of a plug. I'm going to do it anyway. There's 3 of the books. So there is The Garden Forager, which is about edible plants that you have in your garden that you don't know about. Foraging with Kids. So this is about children and grown-ups learning together. And it was I wrote this book because I'd taken out so many groups of kids and parents, and I found that children ask the best questions because, you know, they have more imagination, and we get less imagination as we get older. And so it means that all the questions that I didn't even know I wondered about, I had to go back and do lots of research and find out about it. So this book is also a colouring book too. So as you find the plants, you colour in the pages, so you end up with a beautifully coloured book. And then my most recent book, just out a couple of months ago, is The Tree Forager. So that is highlighting trees, because without trees we're nothing, and it's really, really important that we start to look at trees as massively beneficial for humankind, and start to look at them again. And of course, there are so many hedgerows, you know, that are comprised of trees that have been curtailed somewhat, you know, deliberately for the hedge to be a good hedgerow. So yeah, that's just my little plug, as you might say.
No, thank you very much, Adele. Are there any more questions before we finish today and we lose Adele this evening? Any from the floor? Feel free to unmute yourself. In fact, I'll press the button, which gives you all the option to do so if you can't find the button yourself. Assuming I can find it as well. No, I can't.
Maybe we should consider me coming up there at some point and doing a hedgerow kind of foraging session to get some money for the CPRE.
That would be great.
That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
We'll have a chat about that afterwards. Great. Well, thank you very much, Adele. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us tonight. As we say, information will be passed to you over email after this from our branch. Have a very good night. And if you want to see any more information about what CPRE are doing, as I say, visit cpre.org.uk. Good evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.